My name is Serafina Monet. For as long as I can remember, I have been a creature of quiet observation, more comfortable with the hum of a sewing machine than the cadence of a boardroom conversation. My world has always been one of texture, color, and the patient transformation of raw material into something of beauty and purpose. This inclination, it turned out, was a gentle rebellion in a family that measured life in blueprints and stock tickers. The air in the grand conservatory of the Crestwood Botanical Gardens was thick and sweet, a humid perfume of orchids and damp earth mingling with the crisp scent of champagne. Glass panes arched high overhead, trapping a pocket of perpetual summer against the cool autumn evening. Tonight, the city was celebrating my father, Caspian Monet, a man who built his legacy in steel and glass, a titan of modern architecture, receiving a Lifetime Achievement Award. I stood near a cascade of flowering moonvines, the soft, cream-colored wool of my self-made dress a quiet contrast to the glittering sequins and sharp tuxedos that populated the room. It was a simple sheath dress, born from a blend of fibers I'd been developing for years. To me, it felt like a second skin, a quiet testament to my life's work. To my family, I knew it just looked plain. My father held court near the base of a towering fiddle-leaf figure. At 62, Caspian Monet was more monument than man, his silver hair impeccably styled, his posture as unyielding as the skyscrapers he designed. He spoke with the easy authority of someone who has never been told no, his laughter a low rumble that commanded attention. Beside him, my mother, Genevieve, was a study in curated elegance. A former art critic who now ran the city's most exclusive gallery, she moved through the crowd like a curator herself, assessing, appraising, and networking with a serene, practiced smile. Her gaze swept over me for a moment, a flicker of something I knew well, a mixture of maternal affection and faint, resigned disappointment, before she turned back to the wife of a prominent city councilman. "There you are." My brother Damien appeared at my elbow, a flute of champagne in one hand, his wife, Olivia, attached to his other arm like a designer charm. Damien, at 34, was the son my father had always wanted, a ruthless mergers and acquisitions specialist for a top-tier investment firm, with a corner office overlooking the financial district and a portfolio that was the stuff of family legend. "Serafina," he said, his tone a familiar blend of amusement and condescension. "I'm surprised you could pull yourself away from what is it you call it? Your little studio workshop." I offered a small smile, taking a sip of my water. The familiar ache, once sharp, had dulled over the years into a low, persistent thrum. I wouldn't miss Dad's big night. Olivia's laugh was a light, tinkling sound that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Damien told me you're still doing that weaving thing. It's so quaint. Do people actually buy that sort of thing?" Before I could formulate a reply, my sister Helena joined us, her expression one of carefully managed concern. Helena, the pragmatic one, the successful litigator married to a neurosurgeon, was the family's other pillar of conventional success. "Are we talking about Serafina's hobby?" she asked, her voice smooth. "Mother mentioned you're still in that tiny apartment over by the old cannery district." "Honestly, Serafina, when are you going to put that law degree you abandoned to use? It's time to think about a real future." This was the family chorus, a song I had heard in countless variations for the past 7 years. It began the day I walked away from a full scholarship at a prestigious law school, 2 years into the program, unable to bear another moment in a life that felt like a well-tailored but suffocating suit. I had tried to explain the pull I felt, the deep, resonant calling to create with my hands, to work with natural fibers, to build something sustainable and beautiful from the ground up. They heard only the narrative of failure, the dropout, the dreamer, the daughter who had traded a secure, respectable future for a quaint little hobby. What they didn't know was that my little studio workshop was now a bi-coastal operation with artisans I'd trained myself. What they didn't know was that my weaving thing had evolved into the development of a revolutionary sustainable textile, a fabric woven from a unique blend of reclaimed cedar pulp and cultivated sea kelp that was both biodegradable and luxuriously soft. What they didn't know was that 3 weeks ago, I was on the cover of Craft and Chronicle, the most respected design publication in the world, hailed as a visionary. And what they certainly didn't know was that my company, Weft and Willow, had just accepted a $450 million acquisition offer from the Sterling Collective, the world's largest luxury fashion conglomerate. I had learned, through years of quiet observation, that their validation was a moving target, always just out of reach. Sharing my victories prematurely only invited their critique, their unsolicited advice, their attempts to steer my ship back towards the shores they knew. So I kept my counsel. "I'm happy, Helena," I said, my voice softer than I intended. "I'm doing what I love." Damien scoffed, a dismissive wave of his champagne flute sloshing the golden liquid. "Happiness doesn't pay the bills, Sarah. Living hand-to-mouth in a walk-up isn't a sustainable life plan. We're just worried about you." The conversation was mercifully cut short by the approaching sound of my father's confident footsteps on the stone floor. He was escorting a man I recognized instantly, his face a familiar sight from the editor's letter page of every design magazine I cherished. Theodore Croft. He was the legendary editor-in-chief of Craft and Chronicle, a kingmaker in the worlds of design, fashion, and architecture. He was here tonight to present my father's award. "Theodore," my father said, his voice booming with pride. He placed a heavy, proprietary hand on my shoulder. The gesture was meant to look like affection, but it felt like an anchor. "I'd like you to meet my family. This is my eldest, Damien, my daughter Helena." He beamed at them. Then he turned to me, and the light in his eyes dimmed, the familiar shadow of disappointment falling across his face. "And this is my youngest, Serafina. She dabbles in textiles." Dabbles. The word landed like a small, smooth stone dropped into a still pool, the ripples spreading through me. It wasn't malicious, it was worse. It was dismissive. It erased 7 years of 12-hour days, of failures and breakthroughs, of pouring every ounce of my soul and every dollar I had into my vision. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, but held my smile in place, extending a hand to the famous editor. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Croft. I'm a great admirer of your publication." Theodore Croft took my hand, his grip surprisingly firm. He had kind, intelligent eyes that were studying my face with an unnerving intensity, as if trying to solve a puzzle. "Monet," he murmured, his brow furrowing. "Serafina Monet. Good heavens." His eyes widened in recognition. He released my hand and immediately pulled a slim tablet from his leather satchel, his fingers flying across the screen. "I knew it. I knew I recognized you." The air around our small family circle grew still. My father's proud smile faltered, replaced by a look of confusion. Theodore turned the tablet around. And there I was. It was the cover of last month's Craft and Chronicle. A photograph of me in my sun-drenched workshop, surrounded by spools of shimmering, sea-green thread and bolts of fabric that draped like liquid light. My hands, stained faintly with natural dyes, were holding a length of the cedar kelp weave. The headline blared in elegant font, "Serafina Monet, weaving the future of sustainable luxury." The silence that descended was absolute, a vacuum in the otherwise buzzing conservatory. Damien's champagne flute paused halfway to his lips. Helena's perfectly lipsticked mouth fell slightly open. Olivia's manicured hand tightened on Damien's arm as if for balance. My father stared at the screen, then at me, then back at the screen, his face a mask of disbelief. That's not possible." "Not possible?" Theodore Croft's voice was alight with genuine excitement. "Caspian, your daughter is a phenomenon. Dr. Serafina Monet." He began reading from the digital article, his voice carrying in the sudden quiet. "Founder and Chief Creative Officer of Weft and Willow, the artisanal textile company that has quietly revolutionized sustainable materials. Her proprietary sea-cedar weave is being called the most significant innovation in eco-luxury fabric since the invention of tencel." He looked up at me, his eyes shining. "You're the one who figured out how to stabilize the kelp fibers. It's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant." I could only nod, my throat suddenly tight. It took a few years to get the process right. My God. Theodore turned back to my father, who looked as if one of his own buildings had just crumbled before his eyes. "Caspian, do you have any idea what your daughter has built?" Every major fashion house, from Paris to Milan, has been trying to get their hands on her fabric for the last year. It's next to impossible to source. Damien finally found his voice, a strangled whisper. Serafina, you never said anything. You never asked, I replied, the words soft but clear. You assumed. Helena, ever the litigator, was already shifting into cross-examination mode. This magazine, when was this published? 3 weeks ago, Theodore supplied, still scrolling enthusiastically. The same week the Sterling Collective announced their acquisition of Weft and Willow for, he paused, searching the text. Here it is. An estimated $450 million. A small, choked gasp escaped Olivia. My father's face had gone from pale to ashen. But your apartment, my mother said, materializing at my father's side, her voice a fragile thread. You drive that old sedan. I live simply because I choose to, I said, finding my own voice at last. It felt steadier than I expected. The apartment allows me to be close to my workshop, and my car is reliable. My worth isn't tied to the things I own, Mom. It's tied to the things I create. Theodore was still reading, completely engrossed. Listen to this, he said to the small, stunned crowd we had inadvertently gathered. Ms. Monet, who holds a doctorate in material science she completed through a self-funded remote program, built her company with a fierce independence, turning down early venture capital offers to maintain creative control and ethical sourcing standards. He looked up, his gaze sweeping over my family before landing on my father. His expression was one of pure astonishment. Caspian, your daughter is one of the most important young designers in the world. The material she invented could fundamentally change the fashion industry's environmental impact. It's groundbreaking. He paused, and his next words were delivered with surgical precision. And you introduced her as someone who dabbles. The question hung in the humid air, thick and heavy. A few nearby guests were now openly staring, their polite chatter ceasing. I could see the event photographer hovering, sensing a moment. My father opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked at me, truly looked at me, perhaps for the first time in 7 years, and all he could see was a stranger on a magazine cover. You didn't know because you didn't look, I said, my voice quiet but unwavering. You decided the day I left law school that I had failed. You drew a line in the sand, and on your side was success, and on my side was this. My little hobby. You never once considered that I could be building a different kind of legacy, one measured in sustainability and beauty, not just square footage and profit margins. Damien set his glass down on a nearby tray with a hand that trembled slightly. The law school scholarship, you gave it up for this? I gave it up because I had a different calling, I corrected gently. A calling that required space to think, to create, to fail and try again without a committee of worried relatives critiquing every move. Helena's legal mind was whirring, connecting the dots. The acquisition, $450 million. What was your ownership stake? A faint smile touched my lips. It wasn't triumphant, merely factual. I was the sole owner. I never took on outside investors. The number, whole and undivided, seemed to suck the remaining oxygen from our little bubble. Damien physically sat down in a nearby wicker chair. My mother's hand flew to her chest. $450 million, my father breathed, the words barely audible. Your worth. The money was never the point, I said, looking directly at him. The point was to create something meaningful. Something that would last. Something I could be proud of. The money is just a byproduct of that. Theodore Croft was watching my father now with a keen, analytical expression. Caspian, I have to ask, he said, his voice laced with an almost academic curiosity. How does it feel to learn, in front of all your esteemed colleagues, that the daughter you considered a disappointment is now, by any metric, one of the most successful people in this room? The question was a scalpel, laid bare for everyone to see. I watched my father grapple with it, the shock, the embarrassment, the dawning, horrifying realization of his own blindness. His entire career was built on vision, on seeing what others could not, and yet he had been completely blind to the value of what was growing in his own backyard. I'm proud, he finally managed to say, but the words were hollow, a reflexive defense. Are you? I asked, my voice still soft. Are you proud now? Because just last Christmas, you told Uncle Marcus it was a shame I was throwing my life away, and that you hoped I'd at least marry someone sensible who could take care of me. My father flinched as if struck. Helena looked at the ground, her cheeks flushed with color. Damien stared at his hands. Serafina, my mother intervened, her voice adopting the smooth, diplomatic tone she used to de-escalate tensions with difficult artists at her gallery. We have always loved you. We were just concerned. We didn't understand. You didn't understand because you didn't try to, I replied, not with anger, but with a profound and weary sadness. Every time I tried to show you a new weave or explain a breakthrough with a new dye, your eyes would glaze over. Every family dinner turned into an intervention about my choices. You weren't concerned about me, you were concerned about what your friends would think. The master of ceremonies chose that moment to tap the microphone, his voice echoing through the conservatory, calling everyone's attention for the award presentation. The spell was broken. The crowd began to shift, their focus pulled towards the small stage set up amongst the palms. As the others began to move, Theodore Croft lingered. Ms. Monet, he said, his voice low and sincere. It was an honor to meet you. Truly. What you've accomplished and how you've done it, it's the kind of story we live to tell. Thank you, Mr. Croft. Please call me Theodore. And I meant what I said. The Sterling Collective acquiring your technology is a seismic shift. I'd love to do a follow-up piece on what's next for you. I'd like that, I said. I'll be heading up Sterling's new global division for sustainable innovation. And I'm also using a portion of the acquisition funds to establish a foundation. The Weft and Willow Foundation for supporting traditional artisans and funding research into new eco-friendly materials. Extraordinary, Theodore murmured. He handed me his card. My personal cell. Call me anytime. He gave my father one last, unreadable look before melting into the crowd. My family stood frozen, an island of stunned silence in a sea of movement. The distant sound of my father being lauded on stage was a strange, disconnected background noise. Finally, Damien spoke, his voice raw. Serafina, why didn't you tell us? Would you have heard me? I asked him gently. Or would you have told me it was a pipe dream, like you did when I first bought my industrial loom? You told me to return it and put the money in a sensible index fund. Helena, ever the strategist, was already thinking ahead. The tax implications on a sale of that size are staggering. Do you have adequate counsel? I almost laughed. The sound was foreign in my own ears. I have a team of lawyers and accountants who have been managing the deal for 6 months. It's all been structured through a series of trusts and charitable endowments. It's handled, Helena. But family should help family, my mother said weakly. Family should support family, I corrected softly. There's a profound difference. You wanted to help by pushing me back onto a path you understood. I needed you to support me while I forged my own. My father had returned from the stage, his heavy glass award clutched in his hand, his face pale. He had been silent, absorbing the tidal wave of information. Now he stepped towards me, his eyes filled with a bewilderment so complete it was almost painful to witness. Serafina, he began, his voice raspy. We made a mistake. I made a mistake. I looked at his face, at the cracks in the monumental facade, and for the first time in a very long time, I saw not the great architect Caspian Monet, but just my father. A man lost and confused. I never wanted to shut you out, Dad, I said. I just wanted you to trust me. To trust that my compass was pointing true, even if it wasn't pointing in a direction you recognized. The apartment, he murmured. The old car. You let us believe you were struggling. I let you believe what you wanted to believe, I replied. Your assumptions about my life said more about your values than they did about my bank account. If you had only become proud of me after discovering I was wealthy, what would that pride really be worth? The truth of it settled between us, heavy and undeniable. So, what happens now? Helena asked, her voice small. Now, I said, turning to look towards the center of the room, where servers were beginning to cut a large, celebratory cake. Now we go and have a piece of cake to celebrate Dad's incredible career. Tomorrow, I fly to Paris for my first strategy meeting with the Sterling Collective Executive Board. Next week, I'm giving a keynote speech at the Global Sustainable Design Conference in Copenhagen. And next month, the first grant from the Weft and Willow Foundation will be awarded. I met each of their gazes in turn. You are all welcome to be a part of my life. My real life. But it has to be on my terms. With respect for the path I've chosen, not the one you wished I had. Later, as the evening was winding down, my father found me by the Moonvine Cascade again. The crowd had thinned, and the string quartet was playing a soft, melancholic melody. "I owe you an apology," he said, his voice stripped of its usual bravado. "Not just for tonight. For 7 years of blindness." "I know, Dad," I said simply. "How do I make it right?" he asked, his gaze earnest, searching. I thought of all the years of feeling invisible, of having my passion dismissed as a childish whim. I thought of the loneliness of celebrating my breakthroughs alone in my workshop. "Start by asking questions," I said. "Real questions. Not about when I'm going to get a real job, but about the tensile strength of the cedar fiber, or the challenges of creating a color-fast dye from lichen. Be curious about my world. Try to see the beauty in it that I see." He nodded slowly, a profound understanding dawning in his eyes. "I can do that," he said. "I want to do that." The drive home was quiet, but it was a new kind of quiet. Not the tense, brittle silence of unspoken disappointment, but a soft, contemplative quiet, filled with the potential of things unsaid, of conversations yet to be had. As I was getting out of the car, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Damien. "Can we get breakfast this week? I want to hear about Weft and Willow. For real this time. I'll even try not to talk about EBITDA margins." A moment later, another one from Helena. "I looked up your Craft and Chronicle article. It's incredible. The legal framework for protecting intellectual property on a new material must have been fascinating. I'd love to hear about it." And then, one last one, from my mother. "Your dress was beautiful tonight, darling. You made it, didn't you? I should have known. I am so sorry it took us so long to truly see you. I am so proud. Love, Mum." I stood on the sidewalk under the glow of a street lamp, the cool night air on my face. A slow smile spread across my lips. Tomorrow I would wake up in my simple apartment, drink my coffee, and walk to the workshop that had been both my sanctuary and my battleground. I would continue the work that had always been the truest expression of my soul. The world had known about my success for 3 weeks. But my family was just learning of it now. The revelation wasn't about the money or the fame. It was about respect. It was about being seen. Proving them wrong had never been the goal. The real victory was in giving them the chance, finally, to be proud of the person I had been all along. The true foundation wasn't the one I was building for other artisans. It was the one I was tentatively, hopefully, beginning to rebuild with my own family. One real question, one moment of true understanding at a time.